Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Passball Show for the 5th day of January 2018. Of course, a Friday, which means we got some football picks as we'll talk about the postseason games we have this weekend, the 2 games on Saturday, the 2 games on Sunday. I'm going to touch a little bit and at least give my perspective of what I feel about the piece that was reported by ESPN today in regards to the dissension within the hierarchy or the main figures of the New England Patriots. Also going to talk a little bit about Jon Gruden's new contract that he's expected to sign with the Oakland Raiders and how that relates to some other long-term contracts that have the same length to it. Of course, Pielli's picks, but the first thing that I want to do outside of throwing a number out there, 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. Get you up. Anything that's on your mind in the world of baseball, sports, and unifying America. And, if we have time, I'll throw another message and just basically along the same lines of keeping the dialogue going, talking to each other, because we don't seem to want to do that anymore. And I do have a message. I hope I will get to it later after Pielli's picks. But the first thing I did want to finish off yesterday, and I actually felt bad because I'm talking about this writer that writes this story. Basically, I'm sick of hearing about the Buffalo Bill fans being excited that they made it to the playoffs and yada, 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 when there could be nuclear war and people don't like the president. And the bottom line, it was just a story that really was the antithesis of everything that is positive when we talk about this world. Because, you could watch the news, you could listen to the negative stories that are compounding upon negative stories and get yourself depressed or get yourself upset or get yourself angry. But sports and the world of entertainment delivers something that it provides an alternative. And I did get this writer's name after doing some research. And you know what? It's not coming up to the top of Google feeds anymore. And you used to have to dig back and find the right day's paper that a story was reported in. Now you gotta make sure you're finding the right line in regards to Google. I mean, I was checking page upon page upon page, and most of the stories are talking about the Bills fans, how excited they are. The excitement that's going through town, how there's going to be potentially as much as 40% of Buffalo Bill fans in Jacksonville for the game on Sunday. And obviously everything that's happened with the Andy Dalton thing and the Taylor Croft thing. I'm sorry, Taylor Boyd. The guy that caught the touchdown in the Cincinnati Bengals game and when they beat the Baltimore Ravens, allowing the Buffalo Bills to make the playoffs. But there's obviously been a lot since then. So this guy, Rod Watson, who I'm glad to finally know his name, and it doesn't mean that he's a terrible writer. I mean, if this story is a reflection of his work, then yes, he is. He's a god-awful writer, and he is there to write about doomsday as it's coming. He's probably the guy that was writing on December 31st, 1999, that the world was going to end in 2000 because of computers. Y2K, Y2K. But, I'm glad to have his name out there, and I will continue to reference it. But Rod Watson's the guy that decides to write this story about the, everything that's really bad about journalism. His story, the title of his story, Playoff Game. Please don't tell me any more about it. And this was published on the 3rd of January. So you're talking a couple days after. Not only the Bills win, they're going to the playoffs, but people are celebrating to New Year's. And then he's got the nerve to throw out there, get a life. I mean, this is really the definition of the guy that needs to get a life. So Rod Watson, but like I said, from your perspective, I just hope that this happens to be one story that you've written in a series of a bunch of other ones that just is terrible. It's just, it doesn't have any kind meaning to it whatsoever. You're essentially telling people to be miserable, be unhappy, follow the news, fear for your lives. God forbid you celebrate for a couple moments or a week when a team that hasn't been to the postseason in 18 years is finally getting a chance to go there. And, oh, by the way, the odds say that they are 9-point underdogs going to Jacksonville. And they have a chance that they're probably not going to have, or they may very well not have, their top all-around player, and that's running back LaShawn McCoy. So, I mean, you're going to deprive, essentially, through your own words of your content. Your goal is to deprive the fans of the Buffalo Bills, who haven't had anything to celebrate in 18 years, the chance to look forward to what could very well be one game in Jacksonville, and their season will be over. So after that, they could go back to being miserable like you want them to be, Rod Watson. You want to keep throwing the negative out there. Sure, the rest of the negative world is still going to exist long after the Buffalo Bills postseason run ends. So I'm done talking about that, but I do remember a story a couple years ago that Paul Hoynes, and Paul Hoynes is a very well-respected writer in Cleveland, covers the Indians, and he wrote a story in the middle of the 2016 season saying basically, back to truck up. It's time to rebuild. It's time to give up. This team's going nowhere. Let's just start it out from scratch. Let's trade all the top players. Let's get some prospects in here. Let's turn this place into a parking lot. Quoting, of course, Randy Quaid from Major League 2, by the way. But, his story turns out, and I don't know if it was an inspiration. I don't know if it was bulletin board material. I don't know if the Indians threw it on, as soon as you come into the locker room, so you see a story day in and day out. But the Indians certainly played very good baseball down the stretch of the season, had a great postseason, and made it really to within a small break of winning the 7th game of the World Series in 2016. Now, Paul Hoynes is the example of the guy that, he wrote a bad story. Now, he took a shot at a hot take, and it didn't work out well for him. You look back, and I'm sure he wants to forget that he ever wrote that story. And maybe the same thing here with Rod Watson. And I hope, if there's anything that I could hope for, maybe the Buffalo Bills have a run in them, just to make this guy unhappy. But moving on, of course, we can't address the show today without talking about the situation with Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, and Robert Kraft, and at the very least, the report out of ESPN saying that obviously there's a toxic relationship, or the discussion between the three of them involved with a lot of things that are going on are going to lead to their demise. And the story was written by Seth Wickersham, who, by the way, is a pretty well-respected ESPN writer. So this isn't a clown that doesn't have a reputation behind him and is looking to put his name out there and get some more attention. This is a well-respected writer that decided that he had enough information to put this story out there. And I tell you, I've read it from top to bottom, and I think pretty similar to most other news that you read. I mean, if you have a negative vibe already, you're going to think that this is more damning news than it really is. If you hate the Patriots and you read this story, you're talking around that coffee machine or that water cooler in the morning saying, wow, Patriots are really going down. But you're not acknowledging your own biasness in there when you say, listen, I'm a Jets fan, or I dislike the Patriots. I don't like Bill Belichick, or I don't like Tom Brady. Those things barely ever come out at a water cooler or a coffee machine conversation in a world of work. But really what I took out of it, and I think there's a little bit of smoke. I mean, if you look at this story of what's going on with Tom Brady's trainer, and there is a rift there. Bill Belichick has done what he could to try to ban him from the facility and not allowing him there except for certain times. And, they got the TB12 camps and stuff that Alex Guerrero is part of. So there is a little bit of a rift there. That I don't think you're coming up with any uncharted material when you're mentioning that there is a little bit of a rift there. And you got the thing that happened in regards to Jimmy Garappolo. I mean, Jimmy Garappolo was certainly a quarterback that Bill Belichick was thinking about using in the future. He had him ready. He felt like he was the guy that was going to be able to take over for Tom Brady. Obviously, the biggest issue that we could talk about this whole thing, the thing that probably carries the most water, is Tom Brady's future. And what we tend to do as members of the media, we tend to throw these stories out there and blow them up to make them out to be a little more personal than they really are. I mean, go back to Joe Montana. You know, the 49ers traded for Steve Young. And Steve Young he did not come to the 49ers. He did not sit as the backup for Joe Montana for, a couple of years with the thought that that's all he was ever going to be. So at some point, the San Francisco 49ers had to make a similar decision. They've got their guy in there as a backup. They feel like he can learn this offense. And eventually, the intention of him being there was going to be to take over for Joe Montana. The Green Bay Packers drafted Aaron Rodgers. They drafted Aaron Rodgers with the intention of, at some point, giving him the reins to be the everyday quarterback instead of Brett Farve. You got what's going on potentially with the Giants. They got the number 2 overall pick. There's a good chance that they're going to take one of these top 2 quarterbacks. Sam Darnold is likely going number 1 to Cleveland, or maybe he won't, or maybe somebody will trade up for him. But the Giants, at the very least, will have the option to take either Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen. And I tell you, it would be pretty silly if they chose not to. That being said, Eli Manning looks at himself as the quarterback of the future of the New York Giants. These things are never handled very well. Think about Eli's brother Peyton in Indianapolis. I mean, there wasn't even a discussion, or if there was, it didn't go very far, because Peyton Manning was traded, probably before he even had much of a chance to meet Andrew Luck. The Colts knew what they were doing. They knew they had to take, this was the consensus number 1 overall pick. But they knew they had to think of a decision. There's 3 things you could do. You could trade the incumbent. You could allow for the young quarterback to start or split time with the incumbent. Or you could have the young quarterback sit and wait for playing time or the time to be right from the incumbent quarterback. So this is the one thing that I haven't heard a lot in regards to the media discussion today. A lot of it is anti-Patriots. And you know what? If there are people that are either in the New York market, which obviously don't care very much for Boston sports, or on the national level tired of the Patriots having all the success that they've had, they're going to tend to think that there is a lot more to this than there really is. But my point is, yes, you could say there's some smoke with the Alex Guerrero thing. You could say there's some smoke with the Jimmy Garappolo trade. But the only issue that exists here is the same issue that has existed for many great quarterbacks in the NFL. And one of the biggest questions that we want to ask in regards to this is, when is the right time to go? I mean, you want to ask Joe Montana? Because the 49ers decided it was time to move on, but he still had a couple of years left in Kansas City. Brett Farve played in all those consecutive games. It was time for Aaron Rodgers. He ended up moving. He went to Minnesota. He finished his career with the Jets. Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos. So from the organization standpoint, and this is where the problem is, the rift, if you want to say there's a rift, but I'll tell you this is the same rift that has existed in every single other one of these organizations, and potentially the same rift that we're going to see when we're talking about the New York Giants of next season. A veteran quarterback that's in good shape still feels like he could play. And the ones that have accomplished stuff, like, in other words, the ones that have won Super Bowls, the ones that have become franchise icons, want the say in regards to when they're going to leave. And you could go back for years in the NFL. And it hasn't been the case. In other words, the quarterbacks have wanted to make their own calls, and the coaches and the front offices have made the calls for them. So if you're going to ask me, where does this end up going? I've heard some people say, hey, Bill Belichick's going to resign after the season. You know what? Anything's possible. But I'm reading that back and forth and back, listening to commentary here and there, and I didn't get anything that would make me think that Bill Belichick's going to leave after the season. The bottom line is the Patriots at some point are going to have to think of a successor to Tom Brady. And you know what? Tom Brady looks bad if he had anything to do with the trade of Jimmy Garappolo. My answer to that would be, hey, you know what? Tom Brady, go out there and keep playing well. Win another Super Bowl. Now, and I understand he's won 5. There hasn't been a quarterback in NFL history that's won 5 Super Bowls. He deserves some special treatment. He deserves to be treated like a god in Boston and Massachusetts and that whole New England area. But if he's out there, cheering when Jimmy Garappolo got traded, I hope there's a scenario where the 49ers under Garappolo end up beating Brady and the Patriots in a Super Bowl. The threat of Garappolo is no longer there for Brady. The bottom line is it would be in Bill Belichick's and Robert Kraft's best interest to have at least somebody selected that's training, that's learning the New England offense. So at some point, when Tom Brady is not able to play anymore, there's somebody to turn the franchise off to. This thought, hey, because of the training, the guy's going to play until he's 50. I hope he does, because I'd like to see it. But we know in the world of professional sports, and this isn't going to be intended to be a knock on Tom Brady, but we know in the world of professional sports, the players that play the longest at such a high level usually have something synthetically enhanced in regards to their testosterone and their muscle mass. See, late 1990s Major League Baseball. And all the home run records and all the players playing until their late 30s and their early 40s. If Tom Brady somehow was able to play until his mid-40s or late 40s or 50, good for him. But hopefully he is mature enough to understand that the Patriots have to look out for themselves too. There's still enough talent around this franchise for them to sustain success for the next couple years. And they have to plan themselves as if they're going to be able to do it with Tom Brady or without Tom Brady. And Tom Brady, for the most part, has been able to stay healthy. If he stays healthy, he should get the opportunity. But if Bill Belichick was not on Tom Brady, if he was not judging throws that he used to be able to make that he wasn't making, and wasn't getting on him a little bit harder for the mistakes that he's making that he wasn't making for the last 18 years, he wouldn't be doing his job. And if Tom Brady's upset about that, listen, I understand. Listen, people have done great things, and with that comes this prestige and this feeling that we feel like we're entitled, that we own the world. Listen, Tom Brady's going to the Hall of Fame. Tom Brady is going to be a legend in New England. He's going to be forever remembered in the National Football League as one of the greats to ever play the game. The hardest thing to do is decide how to manage an aging player. What do you do with a superstar that's gotten up there in age? And it's easier, certainly easier to handle when that superstar is playing at a pedestrian level. You say, listen, If we got the performance of last year or 5 years ago out of you, it would keep you. But look at what you're doing now. Tom Brady at this very moment is making it a little bit harder. And he is. He's making it a little bit tougher because of the way that he is performing. The Patriots got the top seed in the AFC. They're going for another Super Bowl. If we're going to play odds here, what team has the best chance of coming out of their conference? I'm going to say it probably is the New England Patriots. I mean, could I see an upset at some point? Yeah, sure. But you tell me what that team's going to be. I mean, I know Pittsburgh played them pretty tough. That looks like the consensus AFC Championship game. I'd like to watch it. And maybe these next couple games, the division game that's going to be played next weekend, and the AFC Championship game is going to come after that. And if the Patriots are lucky enough to get to the Super Bowl again, the game after that, it's going to be interesting to see how Tom Brady plays. And he's going to be on a microscope. Let's be serious about this. If we're going to say anything in regards to, anything that's bad about the Patriots or maybe bad that's coming out of this story, Tom Brady is what a lot of other great quarterbacks have been. Up there in age. And at some point on a franchise that feels like they're going to have to turn the page after a while. It might not be right now. And usually when the star player is not helping out in this regard, sometimes the decisions have to be made for him. And Tom Brady can brown nose to the owner. He can stick with his strength and conditioning coach all he wants. But at some point, there's going to be a tough decision that's going to have to be made. And I think it's going to be made by Bill Belichick. But at some point, it's going to have to get up through the owner. And I know the story kind of makes Brady and Kraft against Belichick. But I think it will be a colossal failure if, number one, the three of them didn't go forward this year. But number two, if the decision turns out to be made for Belichick to part as opposed to Brady. In this case, Bill Belichick should outlast Tom Brady. And I say this to even the most passionate and loving Patriots fan. The Patriots have enough of a team. And listen, Brady has been a large part of it. But at some point, they're going to have to move away from Brady. I'd rather have that quality, solid, Hall of Fame coach in there than have just anybody running it when it comes time to bring in that next quarterback. And I know Belichick is thinking about his future. If he could have seamlessly transitioned from a Brady to a Garappolo, maybe next year, maybe the year after. I know his incoming free agency was going to pose a big issue. And I think it led to some of the dysfunction you saw. Some of the issues between Brady and Belichick. And throw Kraft in there as well. You going to franchise Garappolo at 20-something million when he's not going to play next year? I'm pretty sure that Belichick was pretty set on making a move for next year. And I'll tell you, the best thing that I could say for Tom Brady is if you feel like you could play, go do it somewhere else. And I hate to say it, but how many quarterbacks get that opportunity unless the team has totally fallen apart and is going through a rebuild and the quarterback himself is shot? I understand that happens. But rarely. You got to go through the Joe Montanas and the Brett Favres and the Peyton Mannings. And this year probably Eli Manning. Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to deal with it with Ben Roethlisberger. You know what's going for them? The fact that the Steelers are still winning. And that's the same reason that's going for the Patriots and Brady at this point. their continued dominance. But I tell you, the dominance is going to stop at some point. And hey, maybe it goes on another 3 or 4 years. But maybe it stops. And when it stops, it's going to be drastic. And are you trusting the fact that you have a backup quarterback that's a journeyman in Brian Hoyer? And I'm not talking about the injury standpoint. I'm not talking about that drastic injury that ends Tom Brady's career. But what happens? Let's say it's next season. Let's say it's the season after. Tom Brady goes out there and he is getting his you-know-what handed to him. He can't make a decent throw. Paranoia is setting in, so he's releasing balls too quick. He's throwing interceptions. He's taking hits that he's never taken before. His numbers are terrible. When this happens, what do you expect the Patriots to do? They got to look out for themselves. So I'm not taking Tom Brady's side on this. The only thing that I am saying that's beneficial for Tom Brady, if he wants to keep playing, keep being the tough guy, and go play somewhere else. Because the coach has to outlast the quarterback in this situation. And if he doesn't, you're looking at the Patriots' run ending when the coach leaves. Because I don't think the Patriots are going to be as good with their next head coach. I don't care if it is a Belichick disciple. I don't care if it's a Belichick family member. If the quarterback outlasts the coach, the Patriots are going downhill. Once again, this is John Pielli, Pass Ball Show, here with you on a Friday, 5th day of January 2018. The number, if you want to be involved in the program, is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. Jon Gruden announcing, or the media has announced, that it looks like the Raiders are in agreement for Gruden to become their next head coach. And it looks like there's a press conference set for Tuesday, according to Adam Schefter. And it looks like it's going to be a 10-year contract, probably paying Gruden somewhere around $100 million. So he's going to make about $10 million a year for 10 years. And I start to think about the other 10-year contracts that we've seen in the world of sports. Obviously, hockey has got the record contracts. Well, you got Ilya Kovalchuk with the Devils signed for, 17 years. DiPietro, the goalie with the Islanders, signed a 15-year deal. You've seen many, many cases of hockey signings that have involved well over 10 years. And obviously in baseball, you got the Giancarlo Stanton contract now with the New York Yankees, which is going to cover the next 10 years and about $325 million. So what I'm thinking, and I'm sorry, it's about $295. It was originally 12 years, $325. So I'm trying to think, does that typical contract work? And obviously we're talking about something different. Talking about a head coach. You don't have to worry about Jon Gruden getting hurt on the sidelines. He's not going to be making the big tackle or putting the big hit on somebody or somebody putting the big hit on him. So you figure his job, obviously, is to get the Raiders back to contention. And I really did think about it. I didn't really say it, but the thought was going through my mind that the only reason the Oakland Raiders would have fired Jack Del Rio would be if they had somebody like Gruden in line to replace him. In other words, they weren't bringing in a college coach. They weren't bringing in a top assistant. They weren't bringing in another retread. It probably was going to be either Jack Del Rio or Jon Gruden. So I think the fact that they were close enough with the negotiations with Gruden and had enough of his interest in regards to him becoming the next head coach, that led them to fire Del Rio. No Gruden, I think Del Rio's still there. So I think of an Albert Pujols. I think of an Alex Rodriguez. I think of a Robinson Cano in regards to players that stand out in my mind, getting a 10-year contract. And one of the things that stood out in regards to these players, Pujols, Cano, A-Rod when he first signed the deal with the Texas Rangers. was you were talking about new teams here. So if all the money was equal or the money was close enough, the player was going to stay in their own respective city. That applies to Pujols. That applied to Cano. I don't know if it really applied to Alex Rodriguez, but you're looking at the best player at a young enough age, not even in the prime of his career yet. So when he signs that big deal, the expectation was the Texas Rangers for the next 10 years were probably going to get an Alex Rodriguez that was up near the top of his game. Of course, after the 2007 season, which was season number 7 of A-Rod's contract, as we hit the halfway point here on the Passball Show, just a reminder, this is the Passball Show, John Pielli hosting on the 5th day of January 2018. The number, if you want to call in and be part of the program, is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. Looks like next week, a couple guests we're going to be having on the show. Looks like we will have former Major League infielder for the Red Sox, Diamondbacks, and Blue Jays, amongst other teams, Shea Hillenbrand, and former New York Mets general manager Joe Namath will be joining the program. So as we get closer, we'll talk about exactly which days they're going to be joining the program, but that and many others will be joining the Passball Show, as we are live every Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, on Periscope, Facebook Live, and available on demand on YouTube. So going back to what I was saying in regards to A-Rod. A-Rod opts out of his deal after 2007 with the New York Yankees, becomes a free agent. The Yankees say, hey, we'll give you another 10-year contract. The Yankees, I think, were competing against themselves. I don't think they had to necessarily draw a line in the sand and say, hey, we don't want you. But I think they could have been a little bit tougher in the world of negotiation. Perhaps compensated A-Rod for maybe another season or so. But giving him a 10-year deal, obviously you're paying him for what he did before as opposed to what he was going to do in the future. The same thing with Albert Pujols. Maybe even the same thing with Robinson Cano. So how does that apply to a National Football League coach? A guy in Jon Gruden, who was probably one of the better coaches the Raiders have had in the last, 25 years, maybe since the days of John Madden. So a guy that won a Super Bowl the year he left the Raiders, when the Raiders traded him to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He wins the Super Bowl with them because he essentially has the Raiders playbook when he's going up against the Raiders. And you can see, the amount of coaches or the different coaches that they've had in charge, whether Al Davis was still around or Mark Davis was running the organization, they're best suited to see how things go with Jon Gruden as their coach. And the thing with Gruden was always, hey, does he want to coach again? Does he want to come back? Does he want to give it another shot? Is he happy enough doing Monday Night Football for ESPN in a broadcast booth? And you know what? Unless Jon Gruden leads the Raiders to a Super Bowl, he's not going to make it through 10 years. I'll tell you that. I'll do right off the bat, and I don't know if he's got to win one right away. Probably, certainly not within the first 2 years. Last couple of years they have in Oakland before they moved to Las Vegas. I think he'll get a little bit of a pass. I would expect from a coaching staff standpoint, he'll be assembling some good NFL talent around him to evaluate players, to coach players, to make players better. I also think that the Raiders are going to draft a little better, and they're going to look to build their team around their quarterback, Derek Carr, and try to look at some of the things that happened last year and say, let's be honest for a second. What failed us last year? How did things struggle? How did we get to a point where we went from being an AFC playoff team that was expected to make a nice run in the postseason, but all of a sudden didn't because their quarterback got hurt, to a second division club last year? Was it all coaching? I don't know. You had a lot of talent there that underperformed. You bring in a new coach, I don't think it's going to necessarily turn things around. That being said, Jon Gruden's a no-nonsense guy. He has some ideas in regards to moves that he wants to make. He's going to notice, whether it's from watching Raiders football games or watching film or going over player analysis, some players he wants to keep and some players he wants to get rid of. And he's going to make those moves. So when he does, yeah, I think the chemistry, the clubhouse, locker room mentality of the Oakland Raiders is going to improve. Are they automatically looking at a Super Bowl run? You got to tell me what they did this offseason, coming into next season, and where I think the Raiders are going to be. Because we were all looking at the Raiders as a team that could have, number one, win the AFC West. Number two, potentially, with their quarterback healthy, make a run at the New England Patriots. Neither of those things happened last year. Are the Raiders a roster move or a transaction or a player away from getting back there? I don't know. But they do have the right guy running it. But I do think that the Raiders are going to have to win at some point. And this is the difference between the baseball players that I was mentioning to you. Hey, Albert Pujols, A-Rod, Robinson Cano. They can have all the personal success that they want. They're not losing their contracts if their team isn't winning World Series. Now, I understand A-Rod was a little bit of a unique situation when he got suspended for the steroid use. He had to miss that whole season. Kind of forced the Yankees to be a little tougher with her. I know they got the 30 home run season that followed it. The last season wasn't very good. He wasn't playing that often, and then they released him with another year remaining on his contract.